Welcome to today's interview with the legendary James Dixon. James, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm excited to be here, brother. Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to our discussion. I think we're going to impact some lives.
Absolutely. I've got a little bit of an intro that I wrote out. So I've known James for about it's been what, about 10 months, 9 months?
Yeah.
I think it was May of last year when we got together and met for the first time. So today's interview is with the legendary James Dixon. James's story serves as one of experience, inspiration, and motivation. James is the founder of Absolute Motivation, a content platform that has motivated hundreds of millions of people across the globe through his content. His story will inspire you to see the obstacles you face every day as an opportunity to turn it into something great. Today, we'll talk about his past, present, and future, what landed us to this moment here. James and I first met back in May of 2023. Brought together by close friends and business partners, our friendship began on a journey of healing and self-discovery. James has helped me and countless others tap into their true potential through the sharing of his experiences, mission, values, insight, and purpose. So I'm extremely excited to introduce international best-selling author, the author of Absolute Motivation, and today's episode guest with none other than James Dixon. Did I miss anything?
No, you didn't, except for the fact that you nearly drowned me at my first cold plunge.
That was a good cold plunge. Well, maybe we can throw the pictures of that up.
Oh, no pictures.
Oh, man. James, tell me a little bit of what you've been up to for the last 2024 just started. What has the year been off to? You've been doing a couple speaking engagements.
Oh, man.
The book's off to a good start. Give us the background. Tell us what you're up to right now.
Well, I've just been traveling, but one of the things that I just came back from a trip where we took amputees who walked for the very first time this year, and we gave them awards for gold digging. So we set a goal that one day you'll get up, you'll walk, you'll run, you'll do something, you'll cut your own grass, you'll drive. It doesn't matter with the age, how long you've been an amputee. It was about setting goals, and we picked 2 out in Atlanta, Georgia. Did a banquet, red carpet, and let their families see them walk in for the first time. So that I just finished. That sparks all kind of purpose in my life. And then, of course, I go travel and speak to people with 2 legs like you, and it's always good. But anytime I can work with amputees or anyone now, 2024 has just been about serving, you know?
Yeah, I love that. So we'll dive into it a little bit today, but James's story started back years ago. I mean, when you were the book tells the beginning all the way from when you were about 3 years old. And then it really took off when you were about 11 years old when you had your leg amputated. And so James's story of inspiration, overcoming obstacles, dealing with hardships and things that most people don't have to deal with on an everyday basis has really grown into what Absolute Motivation is now. And for those that may be watching this video, this is one of the more recent videos as James has started talking a little bit with showing his face on the channel. But we want to take this as an opportunity to really let people that have been part of the Absolute Motivation community, the hundreds of millions of people that have seen the content, to be able to identify and learn about the team that's bringing this content and the mission behind it. So tell us just a brief history, and we'll dive into a little bit later and go into more depth, but a little bit of how you got into the Absolute Motivation world that you live in now with the content, with the book. Right. Give us the background on that.
Well, I got to tell you, so you can imagine the one thing that everyone needs is a spark plug to get you going, especially if you go through something, right? You're going through a challenge, the loss of a limb, divorce, bankruptcy, whatever. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to get motivated again. Because what's the point of getting up when you feel like you've been knocked down? If I get up, I'm only going to knock down again. And so if you get someone to give you like the step-by-step encouragement, like now what? After it all happens, it is what it is, right? But how do I change from what it is? And I transform it into what it can be. And so the channel started off with me going off a team of people. It's never just one individual, right? So I had a guy that knew technology stuff because I wasn't savvy with that. That's Nav. I have a musician, Nems. I had another guy who was an editor. And then the more that we worked together, we were creating this channel. Because I was creating content, I was going to the hospitals, and I'm trying to talk with people and tell them, like, hey, you can get up again. Don't give up. Don't quit. And the more that I was having these conversations, it was too slow. One person at a time, I would never get there. And one particular person that changed, that was my whole life, was a guy named Pat. Pat had attempted suicide. And it just so happened that he survived only because he had taken so many pills, and it was below freezing outside, that when he shot himself, that it kept him from dying. He was freezing to death now instead. It kept him from bleeding out. The ambulance finally got there. The end result of it is they had to do an amputation, which is called a guillotine. You remember the whole thing of, for punishment, guillotine,
Yep.
right? Well, imagine losing both legs with no anesthesia because you've taken so many pills they can't put you under. You just got to grin and bear it, literally. This day and age, this was what happened. This guy had to just sit there and they were counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2, leg gone. They tell him again, we got to do it again. Count down, both legs are gone. Now the trauma from that, the experience from that, the PTSD from that. I started working with him, and this guy, they called me up and they say, can you talk with Pat? And Pat, we'll start working with him, telling this guy what he can be. And I'm emphatically telling him. And so we got to the point where he started to believe. And that's what the channel was kind of like. Having somebody believe for you until you can believe for yourself. And when things were going negative in his life, he ended up taking his life with me watching. That changed everything. From that moment on, I went from just a motivational speaker to I was imparting part of myself in people. That was the difference. So absolute motivation became a channel because I wanted to channel something from, take the spark of divinity that is in us and our faith and to place that in others until they could become one. So Pat's situation changed me, but it evolved me so that I could be more.
Wow. I mean, we see the impact and the ripple effect and the impact on others, connections and degrees away through the transitive property, right? Like a conversation that you have with someone that then inspires something that you say on stage, and then you go and speak at that stage, and then there's someone that comes up to you afterward and says, oh, I felt like this exact part was something that I needed to hear. I think people often overlook the impact that a positive and a negative interaction can have on someone.
Man, come on.
Right? We miss the impact that can have. And a lot of times we also, I think we fail because of our attention spans in this digital day and age. I think we often lose the ability to romanticize life a little bit. This is something I've been thinking about recently, but if you scroll through the videos on the Absolute Motivation YouTube channel that is now, I think it's at 1.5 million subscribers now.
Right.
It's right around there.
Yeah.
It's incredible. One of my favorite things is to go through the comment section because it's so rare to see positive comment sections on social media. But if you scroll through the videos, you see this native community of people that say, I was at the brink. I was right on the edge. I was having a really hard time, and I found this video, and this is what changed my life. Right? And it's like we fail to. We often overlook and we fail to see the small things and impressions and moments like that to really allow ourselves to get past our ego or what other people are going to think of us if we let a little emotion get to us. But when you get that motivation and that inspiration stirring inside of you, that 2-line comment is the brief synopsis of a life-changing moment for people. And so it's incredible to see this platform that you've built with Absolute Motivation, the content side, the speaking side, the conversation side. And my favorite part is that what you see on a video and the content that you hear is the exact thing that you get from an interaction with James. And that's been awesome to see. So, I want to segue a little bit now. And let's go back to the earlier stages of your life. If anyone has not picked up a copy of Absolute Motivation, you can find it on Amazon. There's multiple places that you can find it on. Stop what you're doing right now, pause this video, go buy a copy. This is one of the best autobiographies that I've ever read in my life. And I read it in 2.5 hours. And it wasn't a small, I've got notes. You can see I tore this thing apart. I've got notes all throughout it. And actually, this was what I was halfway through reading this book, and I said, James, I'm coming into town. We need to do a podcast because this story needs to be told in video form so that we can break this down. And it was a week ago. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Indiana reading this, and I sent him a text, and then I sent a text, again, going back to the value and the power of people, sent a text over to our friend Kyle Deaver, and we're here in his studio at Bad Bet Productions, helped us lock this down to be able to, sit down to be able to have this discussion. So very grateful to Kyle, very grateful to you for taking the time to sit down. But to start, I want to tell the story of rocks. You know the story I'm talking about?
Yeah, dude. Throwing rocks. About
throwing rocks. Let's start with that story and tell me, I can pull it up in the book, but give us the breakdown of what happened with rocks.
Man, one of the things I would watch all the other kids throw rocks, and it just seemed like it was fun. Here I am. I've gone from wheelchairs to having my first walker because I wasn't able to walk on my own until after I was 11. But I would watch the kids throw rocks at cars and take off, and it looked like it was so much fun. I mean, there's nothing worse than sitting there on the outside watching, and it was like, man, I want to hit a car with a rock. Because, you got to start with goals, right? And so here I am watching the kids, and they would never catch the people. So I watch the kids, they come in between the houses, boom, they hit these cars, the people stop, they get out of the car, the kids are gone, they laugh, and they're having a good time, the people driving around looking for them, they never catch them, and I was like, this is the greatest crime of all time. You can go hit these cars, and they can never catch you. And so I took my walker, and I went down the steps, I get onto the curb, and I wanted to hit cars because I didn't have enough reach, right? So I'm throwing these rocks, but I'm not hitting them. So I have to get in the street to make sure that I can hit these cars. And finally, man, I had that glorious moment that I hit my first car. It was like, it felt so good. I finally got the car to stop in front of me so I could hit it.
How old are you at this time?
I probably was like 5, I was about 5 at the time when I did this.
Okay, so you're 5 in the middle of the street.
Yes.
You got your walker.
Yeah.
You're close enough where you could probably kick the wheels on the car.
He had to stop. He could have hit me, right? but he stopped because I was in the road. And he didn't know I was waiting to hit him. I think he probably thought, oh, this is cute. This disabled kid is going across the street. Let me stop. Nope. Got him. And then I was trying to get away like everyone else. But my speed was
a slow roller.
I didn't zig when I should have zagged, right? I was like, he saw me rolling, and he started hating. So I just started going up.
All the other kids had run. They
got away.
All the kids got away, right?
I had seen them. Maybe my technique was off something. Maybe I could have, should have not tried to overhand and loft it. If I had gotten the sidearm, maybe I could have had more time. But the guy, as I was running away, I was making my escape. And I can remember he was hot and heavy behind me. And, I probably shouldn't have thrown the rock in front of my own house. and as I'm going up the steps with my walker, he's assisting, and I'm just like, I got to get away. And there's no distance between us. He's either quick, nimble, or spry. I don't know which one it was, but he's an older white guy. And he knocks on the door with me as I'm trying to get in, and he snitched. It was the end of my rock throwing career. I can't believe I didn't get away.
Well, you were 1 for 1.
I was 1 for 1, but I got him.
100% hit rate.
I just wanted to be like everyone else, man.
My favorite, so this is on page 12 of the book, is as you're narrating this, it says, and I'm going to channel my inner James voice here. The gentleman got out of his car and literally followed me, walking just as slowly as I was as I tried to escape. I couldn't climb the steps very well, so he actually helped me up the steps. So, quote, so that I could get away from him, even though the guy I was escaping from me was helping me. This was my favorite part. I was proud of myself, thinking I was really getting away. I can only imagine how humorous it was to have been there to watch the scene play out. Obviously, this is when we talk about core memories. That's got to be just instilled in your brain, right?
That was such a highlight, though, because it felt so good. I really do. The reason why it stood out because I thought I got away with it, and then I got a whooping. So it was different.
But what's really unique, again, I have a grandfather with polio. He's one of my best friends, and he has never taken no for an answer. I mean, at 78 years old, he is slalom water skiing, right?
Wow.
He's been trying to get up the last couple of years. And, you know, I just watched from a very young age, he never took no for an answer. It's always been an inspirational story for me to look back at and watch. But, I mean, all the way into his 70s, here's a guy that pulled us on the boat water ski and taught us all. And then we'd help him load into his wetsuit, get in the water ski. And then he built a custom sock that has a Velcro tip. He's got stitched Velcro on the top. And he'll get up on one foot, and then he'll Velcro his foot down onto the boot and ski on one leg.
Dude, see, look at this. He doesn't invent something if he doesn't go through something. If he didn't have to, what he did, you called custom, I say is an invention. There's probably some other people out there that haven't, even I was thinking as an amputee, if I could get the foot to stay down, right, and I have that sense of security, then I could try it. But I think there's something even with that. Innovation came out of what would have been a limitation.
I love that. You know, as we think about like the deeper context, and you talk about this a little bit in the book, you loved that moment of getting away in the rocks because you felt like you were a part of the group. You felt included. And you talk about trying out for the basketball team. And, you know, the next story we'll talk about in a little bit is how you wanted to feel the grass at the hospital, right?
Oh,
like
wow.
just being able to experience those moments that everyone else your age was doing. And what I loved about your story is that you never took no for an answer. It was never, I have a disability, so that's going to hold me back from doing something. It's like, no, I have a disability, but I'm going to figure out how to do it because I want to be involved. I want to be part of this group. I want to be able to be involved. So, you know, a couple chapters later, you talk about the story of going to, you grew up in Indiana. Right. And then you talk about how you met your neighbor and went to Shriners Hospital in Chicago.
Wow.
Paint the picture and give us the context.
I got to give you this.
Yeah,
so
give the background.
We live in a community that had very little diversity in it. Everyone around me I knew, but there was probably 2 white families in my area, in my community. One guy who was well-to-do, kind of stayed private. We just never knew him, right? We would just see him every once in a while. One day, this older white gentleman comes across the street to ask my grandmother the child on the porch. And back then, it was common to use the term cripple, right? Even the Shriners Hospital was Shriners Hospital for Crippled Children, right? And he said, that was kind of a nickname for me, the kid on the porch, the crippled kid on the porch, because I never came off the porch. I was either going into hospital for surgery, going through rehab, and I couldn't interact with the kids because of stitches or whatever it might be. But I happened to be watching the gentleman, and he'd wave, I'd wave and stuff. But one day he came and he asked for my grandmother, and so I called for her. She comes on, and he was like, "What's wrong with the boy?" And the conversation they began to have, and he said, "I'm a Shriner." And he said, we have a hospital for kids like him, and we'd like to do something for your grandson. I'd like to get him there to the hospital in Chicago. They take a look at him, and maybe we can help him. And since my whole life had been going hospital rehab, and there was almost like a sense of they had resigned that my life was going to be spent being disabled, being in a wheelchair or limited mobility. But if it hadn't been for that neighbor introducing that there was an alternative, that would have been it for me. And so what he did for me changed my life, because I don't go to the hospital. I don't end up finding out that there was a solution. It came in the form of an amputation. No, I didn't want it. I didn't, because I was attached to this lake. As limited as it was me, and it was all I knew. But the fact that this guy was willing to go over racial barriers, be in a community that he could easily have afforded to get out of, go into his life, and to take a kid from Indiana to Chicago, they covered everything, they took care of me. That man changed my life by walking across the street and caring to ask a question, why is the kid always on the porch?
The kid on the porch. I love visualizing that image. Really, I love trying to take like a third person view of experiences like that, right? So I'll say I'm like a video crane. I've got a camera on a crane and I'm in the front yard and I see this neighbor walking up. What you don't see in that moment is that probably for days, weeks, months, years, he had been walking by with awareness. He wasn't walking, he wasn't glued to his phone. He wasn't looking at his feet. He was looking around the neighborhood looking for opportunities to serve. And he noticed one and he observed, and then he approached, and then he offered, and then he rendered the service. And I think that's an important lesson there, is that there's plenty of opportunities to serve and to help people out. You just have to look up.
What he knew, what he had experienced, his life experiences, had equipped him to change my life. But he would have never been able to do so if he hadn't looked up, if he hadn't noticed that there was a reason for why he was there for that time.
Yeah.
So as I grew and matured, I wanted to look that guy up. So go to write the book. And so I asked my mom, do you remember the guy's name? And the home that he was in is now still there, but no one from his family still owns it. And she remembered his last name, so I ended up looking up, and he had passed already. And so, but there was a grandson. And so I felt the need to talk to his grandson and tell him, I need you to know what type of man your grandfather was. He had no idea that his grandfather had changed my life, or because of that, I'm changing lives. And so I needed him to know that it wasn't just a photo on the wall that he looked at and said, that's Grandpa, but that his grandfather changed and touched lives way beyond what he imagined.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget the impact that they can have, not just on the individual, but through the transitive property, that ripple effect of constant. I mean, saving a life, having a conversation with someone, just asking how someone is doing could be the change that changes their entire mood, perception of life, right?
Man. Yeah.
So, that transition to Shriners wasn't easy.
No.
I mean, it was a difficult couple of years for you, but going back to what you talked about, right, with the gentleman that helped you about how his life experiences helped shape into the man that he was at that point. I think the time that you spent at the Shriners Hospital was a pivotal time. Specifically, I think the hardest. There were two things that really stuck out to me about that experience. One, your roommates at the hospital, Matt and Gilbert, and then two, the desire to feel the grass. So let's start. Tell us a little bit about when you land at Shriners and you meet your roommates, Matt and Gilbert. Tell us a little bit about their circumstances, what got us there, and what that room was like.
Well, I can remember going to the hospital. It was something I was accustomed to. Every 6 months I was having surgery. So I was on my 33rd surgery when I arrived there. And when my mom and dad took me, and this is unique because my parents had to come and give parental guardianship to the hospital temporarily. And so when they brought me for the tour of the place, it was one pristine, it was fun, it was lots of things. They took me to a Great Lakes region. That's the area of the hospital that I would be living in. It's like a dorm.
Yeah.
And I get there, and there are two roommates given to me, one named Matt, one named Gilbert. Matt was this white kid whose parents were always there with him. I mean, I had never seen mom and dad together like that, any mom and dad in my life. And they were this kid was in an incubator. And he had already lived beyond the years they said that he would. His parents used to touch him through gloves in this little incubator, but his personality was vibrant. This kid was so positive, and he was always laughing and stuff. And I used to sit in my wheelchair beside him and just talk with him and stuff, And he'd have these conversations back and forth. And I had never seen a kid so deformed physically, but he was free, He was in a box, but he was free. And built a tremendous friendship with him. I loved that guy, and it was being a single kid raised with my grandmother, mother, without other kids always around. It was like the first time I was connected with a brother. And on the other side of me, there was a kid named Gilbert who had again injured at a Cabrini Green accident in the ghetto of Chicago, and it left him paralyzed. And Gilbert was a little surly, a little angry, but those were my two roommates. Gilbert opened up as longer we were in there together, and they had a mirror they placed on the ceiling because we'd always be laying in the bed. We could talk and hold conversations. That way we could see each other. And so we're in there talking. It kept him active, kept us active, and they'd come in and try to get us to keep it down some. But we built this little community in there. But it changed for me. One day, Matt's parents are in the room, and Matt's not. And so we were used to going out for rehab or going for surgery and coming back. But Matt didn't come back. And so his mom and dad came, and they gave a teddy bear to me, and they gave one to Gilbert. And they said, "Thank you for being his friend." And I was like, where's Matt? And they said, Matt went home. And it was at that moment that I realized they weren't talking about going home with him. Them. Matt passed. And when it dawned on me that kids could die in there, fear came in my life for the first time. And then, if that weren't bad enough, Gilbert's mom finally came in, and he had been so excited about her coming. Gilbert was all pumped up about Mom's coming, and he's coming to see you. And it was just what we did. My mom and dad were living in Indiana with my grandmother. His mom lived there in Chicago. And unlike Matt's parents, who were always there, no one ever came to see Gilbert. And finally, when they told him that your mom's coming tomorrow, he's all excited. And so we talked about it all night and stuff like that. And I remember them getting his hair ready and stuff like that. He's all pumped up. She comes in and she said goodbye to him for the final time. She said, "I just can't do it anymore." And to see her abandon him and see him beg, "Mama, please," and then to see this kid, because even though the curtain was closed, I could see the mirror. And I could watch him, and then he wouldn't talk to me anymore. And so I'm watching him, and he won't talk. And then I see him trying to hold his breath. Then I see him try to bite his tongue and trying to drown himself with blood. He's doing all kind of things. The one thing he had control of was his head, and he's trying to take his life because his mom said, I can't do it anymore, and walked away. No hug, no kiss goodbye, no touch of his body, nothing. Just, "I can't do it. I came to say goodbye." They got you. The abandonment and the death caused fear in me. When I wrote this book, it's a diary of many things, but it kept their names going. It reminds people about the brevity of life, and that you can go through things, and it evolves you. It changes you. I saw that being abandoned by his mom opened the door for a nurse who couldn't have children to adopt him and become the mother that he never would have had. I saw Matt live his life to the fullest, and if it was only going to be 8 years, it was the most love-filled 8 years. So I remind people of them, because those situations help shape a whole new aspect of my life.
It's circumstance. And I think a lot of times when we find ourselves in difficult circumstances and hardships and challenges, we often ask ourselves, why me? Right? Pity me, why me? But the times that I have learned the most, that I've had to learn the hardest lessons in my life, or where circumstances didn't go I'm a person that loves being in control, right? Like I love being able to plan out and be in control of things. And when things don't go my way, or when something doesn't go according to plan, or it's not exactly on schedule, I've started to ask myself, instead of, why did this happen? Why why did this occur? Why am I not on time? Why, all this stuff. I try to look and notice, why am I supposed to be here? Why am I running late?
Right.
A quick story. I took a 2-year break from life to go serve for my church as a missionary. And I served up in Washington, speaking Spanish. I got to speak and live amongst the Hispanic community up in Washington and Oregon. And these people worked so hard. I mean, I saw people dedicate their lives to waking up and being up on the farm at 3:30 and working until 8 or 9 o'clock just to provide for their family. And I came home, and about probably a year and a half after I'd been home, there was one day my wife and I, we were down in Utah County, and we were running errands. We were running around the house all over Utah County, and we had 3 or 4 stops that we got to. And we go to one store, and then we're running a little bit late. We're behind schedule, but at this point, we're probably 45 minutes behind the schedule. We get stuck in traffic. We go to Walmart. We check, we're going through all the lines, and then we choose one line, right? There's 50 lines to choose from. I chose the line that I thought was going to go the fastest. And it turned out that one line was the slowest moving line in all of Walmart. And I was so frustrated. I was just like, oh my goodness, we've been sitting here for 25 minutes. And as we get in that checkout line, I noticed there's a Hispanic lady in front of me, and she's got 2 little kids. And she goes up and has to pay for her groceries in 2 different transactions. And this is not, I'm very cautious about when I tell this story, because I'm not trying to say like, oh yeah, I did this good deed or anything, right? But this was a moment that like changed the rewiring of my brain. And I watch as she's got it's probably a 5-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. She's there by herself. I watch as she takes out a prepaid Visa gift card to pay for the first half of her groceries. And then I watch as she checks everything out and pulls out just enough cash to pay for everything. And her 5-year-old boy sees a Sonic the Hedgehog little figurine in the checkout line and says, "Mama, ¿lo puedo comprar? Like, can we buy this?" And she's like, she looks at him and she says, "No, we don't have enough money for that." And I thought to myself, man, I'm so frustrated. I've been in this line for 25 minutes. We're 45 minutes behind schedule. And if I had looked down at my phone, if I had been staring down at the sidewalk and not looking up to see that moment,
you would have missed that whole.
I would have missed that opportunity to pay for a $10 Sonic the Hedgehog and the groceries for that lady.
Wow.
And so I think it's so important to recognize the circumstances that we are in when we're running late, when we're frustrated, when we're stuck in traffic. The term sonder is the term, when you're driving down the street and you see someone else and they drive past you and you're like, man, I wonder what's going on in their life. It's the stark realization that everyone has their own unique lives that they're going through. So as I think back on that experience, that was the experience that came to mind as you shared. Again, we didn't say how old you were when you went to Shriners, but you were 11 years old.
Yeah.
You had 32 surgeries up until that point.
That's right.
And to be there with Matt and Gilbert, it would have been so easy as you played conduit in the middle of the room with 3 beds in that room, one in an incubator, one that's paralyzed from the neck down, and you in the middle. It would have been so easy to sit there and say, why me?
Wow.
And instead, I know, and I could tell through how you wrote this book, you have fond memories of those interactions, of relaying what Gilbert said over to Matt, playing in the middle, talking through the mirrors. And I think it is inspirational and motivational to look back at that moment and realize that the last thing on your mind was, why me?
Right. Man, I think back on something, and I want to acknowledge what you talked about as you served as a missionary. There are 2 versions of my book that are out. The one you have says national bestseller. Only the first 100 came out with that because there's an edit that happened in there. And I wish there probably should be a 3rd one. And so what most people don't know, it doesn't take a great amount of books to sell in a category to get bestseller status, right? But there was an edit that was done on there because something happened with a missionary that strange things. When I was, before I talk about being 11, after I learned to walk, I didn't make the basketball team. But there was a quest in me, a desire in me. I wanted to know not why, your question of like, why am I going through this? But it was like, am I loved? My grandmother always talked about God has a purpose for you, boy, you know? And she would always challenge me, and she always spoke to me in terms like, I won't always be here, so you got to get this now. It's as if she knew that she was a scaffold and that there was going to be a time where that scaffold would be removed and I'd have to stand on my own. And I had this quest about learning about God, and I didn't have my own Bible. And so a commercial comes on, I make a phone call, and it said that I could get my own Bible. So I call this number, and 2 people show up. Ironically, the first name on both of them was Elder, you know. As they show up, I'm talking to these guys, and one of them really connected with me. And every time he would come, I would bring more and more kids to the house until we filled my house up. And then we came out to the ward. I started playing basketball. And I got angry when they removed him because I connected with him. And comes to find out that the ward that I was a part of split because diversity came there. I didn't know that that's why they split or why they abandoned me. It wasn't until the book came out that a guy reached out to me who married the daughter of the state president, who was the one welcoming, who wanted minorities there. He reaches out to me and apologizes for the abandonment. And so when you were standing in line, sometimes you realize you go through something or going through it so you can develop. God's like showing you something. I want you to see that it's not about your schedule. It's about my agenda. And the agenda there was that for you to see that Sonic the Hedgehog moment was more than just a moment. It was a change for you. You had already served, but that it also lets you know that your service doesn't end after 2 years. This is lifelong. Little did I know that the gap that I had in my heart would be brought together if I never wrote that book, if I never wrote about those experiences. I don't find out the other side of the coin and that people were actually fighting for me and that there was a split and a divide that happened and that someone carried burden all those years about me and the kids that I brought with me, but me specifically. But if I don't write it, this kid doesn't read it, who happened to be married. And so I'll be going to meet with him. The very same guy. There are no accidents. There's an agenda that God has for you and I to change lives through the way that we serve, to impact people. I never knew about your grandfather until today, but when I think of that, I love that you never defined I have someone disabled. You talked about what he was able to do. You never mentioned there's any limitation. You talked about creativity that came out of him, and about purpose. You realize for him, like with me, when I look at my kids or I look at the impact that we can make with what we do, when we see someone else empowered, that takes away, when I'm serving, I live an echo large enough that Madden Gilbert I remember. I live big enough that my grandmother resonates today. Conversations that she had with me are conversations that you read about. You talk about being 11 and I'm sitting there. If she didn't come to my rescue and speak to me to get me up. So it wasn't why. It was more thank you. Because without the loss of my limb, I don't find my purpose. Without the gentleman coming across the street, without my grandmother coming to encourage me, without me finding a gap in my heart for my purpose, I don't find out about faith. If I don't write down these things, I don't keep evolving, then I don't find out that there was another side to the coin of frustration I'd felt at different times and abandonment, and realized that I hadn't been abandoned, I was being developed. And in the dark room, sometimes the exposure, whatever is happening with you, you never know what you'll become. But there's a work in progress.
I love the quote that you shared. You know, it's less about your schedule and more about my agenda. Yeah. Right? Speaking from a divine perspective. Devin Johnson, the connection, my business partner, and that introduced us, was the catalyst to introduction for us, shared a really interesting quote with me the other day that he saw. He said, stop prioritizing your schedule and start scheduling your priorities.
Ooh, that's good.
It's less about prioritizing what's on the calendar and more about scheduling what needs to be on the calendar.
Yeah.
Or sorry, the other way around. It's less about scheduling priority.
It's about prioritizing making the priorities the schedule.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. And so as I internalized that, I really started to put more intention behind what I do during my day, right? And I think one of the most important things is the art of reflection, right? As you reflected on this book, as you reflected on those experiences, the reflection that you just shared with us about, you know, the old man walking up onto the porch, the rocks, all of you know, thinking back to all of those. What is vital there is the lesson that you learned from those years later. And I think the most valuable thing for people to realize, and kind of the theme for the discussion that we've had so far, is that nothing happens by chance. I don't believe in bad luck.
Nah. Yeah.
I don't think it's...
Oh, man.
I mean, sure, there are bad things that can happen, and there are bad things that happen to good people. But, I mean, frankly, if you think about the impact and the conversations and the hospital visits that you do now, I don't think you could truly appreciate and empathize and love the kids that are in those situations had you not gone through it yourself.
No.
Had you not been the 11-year-old in the room. And being, you know, you see the people that are like, oh, you'll get through this. This is great. But they've never gone through that. I mean, that's sympathy versus empathy. And I think your ability to empathize, having been a minority black man that grew up in unfavorable circumstances with difficulties and limited mobility and opportunity base, you never let that hold you back. And that platform that you have, not just for the kids that you visit in hospitals, not just for the people that you have conversation with on the street, but for the content that is shared, for like, that is the culmination of what this is. And it's so easy for people to look at, you know, because you get access to the quick handicap line at the airport.
Oh yeah, that's good.
You know,
that's a benefit now,
right? So it's so easy for people to look and be like, oh, there's a guy in a suit and he must have a lot of money and he gets a special line, right? And he gets quicker access to the airport and he gets to go through faster than me. Woe is me, right?
Yeah.
Take a moment and realize, holy cow, what has this guy gone through that I don't know about? It would be so easy, and you know, I'm good at hiding it, but a lot of people don't know the challenges that I've had with mental health, right?
Come on.
2 years ago, being diagnosed, I walked into the doctor's office at 23 years old and get a diagnosis with ADHD, anxiety, depression, and OCD. My whole life makes sense, right? And so it's so easy to look past the signals that make up who we are and who people are, and looking past that and just thinking, oh, they're faulty. They're a terrible person because of what they're doing. And so what I'd urge anyone listening to this right now, or watching this, is to take a moment to take a step back and realize how much everyone that you come in contact with has gone through and is going through and will go through, and focus less on trying to judge and interpret who they are, and just focus on loving them for who they are and loving them for their abilities and what they can do and what they will do.
You know, man, I got to say, I love what you said. I love what you said even about yourself, and I don't want to skate over it, because what you said you endured, people would say, listen, you grew up, you got this, you have all these benefits, you've done this, you've traveled, you have experiences, you got your entrepreneurial spirit is next level, your success. But the fact that you were like, man, there are still stresses, mental issues that we challenge and battle with and the fact that we own it. And we're like, with that, that's also a gift from God, so that it allows you to talk about it, to normalize it, and then to help other people see that you can be productive with it, and then turn that into an outlet to help others. Sometimes the macho thing is to pretend like, I'm a man, or just manned up and did it. Just go get it. Or maybe make motivation a simple quote of something like, you just burn the bridge, just burn the boat, take the island. And that's not what life is just about.
Or in corporate America, we're going to sign this pledge and we care about mental health.
That's it.
It's like, great, let's circle back in a year.
That's it. Every year we mention it. In fact, we have a day. We have a sticker. We created some T-shirts. It's an active plan of embracing people where they are and showing them that they have value and utilizing those gifts. Like, this is the uniqueness of each person and why we have a purpose on this earth.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you said about going through things, right? Like, there were so many. 5 years ago, I wanted to be a college athletic director. That was my life goal. And then COVID hit. And then I joined my first tech startup. And then I dropped out of college. And then, we bought an apartment. And then we bought a house. And then we bought, life. I don't believe in 5-year plans.
No.
I believe in having a general vision of what you want to accomplish. But I mean, my wife and I have worked very, very hard to have the life that we have, right? And so I look at all of the lessons that I learned as a child, how my parents raised me. I had 2 very loving parents that taught me lessons on, not systematically, but taught me the basics of human relations and loving people. And that is the framework and the foundation of the person that I am today. But then it also took a huge, huge step to discovering myself, right? To being having the willingness to go into the doctor to say, hey, I'm having some mental health challenges. I've been going to therapy for 3 years. That's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
And even talking about it.
Exactly. Right? Like I talk very openly about that. And I think that's what's most important is people often, they shun or they suppress the fact that they have weaknesses. But we have a loving God and Heavenly Father that has said, I give you weaknesses so that you can be strong.
Come on, man.
Knowing that we're going to go through trials, we're going to go through hardships and tribulations, but those were all meant to help us be better.
Man, you mentioned a couple of things I got to address. 5-year plans. Whenever I set a 5-year plan, it was like giving a built-in excuse not to do something now. It was allowing myself the ability to wait, postpone, delay, be lazy, because I got 5 years, right? But when I threw the switch and said, I'm done with 5-year plans, because things that I've done this year alone were supposed to take 10 years, right? 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. But I look at it this way. I am not interested in setting out these long-term goals. I set goals with the idea that if I don't have tomorrow, I left it all. And I am wringing out everything that I am. Every day I wake up with that. Sometimes I don't sleep well, not because I'm an insomnia. Maybe I have some of that, right? But my mind doesn't rest all the time because I think about. There was a movie called Schindler's List. You ever see it?
I haven't seen it, but I know about it.
All right, so at the end of the movie, he has a watch on, and he goes, if I had sold this watch, how many more people could I have saved? He's thinking about, they had done all this work. They were like, man, you've done so much. And he was like, but it could have been one more. I do not want to end life with a question mark of what I could have become. I don't want my kids to think the idea of that I was a good man, if a great was possible. I think that you can make great your average. I think you can do that. And I'm not talking about flawless. With my imperfections, with my attitudes, even in those things, challenging myself daily to become more so I can serve more. What you're doing, you know?
I think there's a stark difference between a plan and a vision.
Yeah.
right?
Right.
For me, when I had learned how to set a plan, right, a 5-year plan, I'm going to map out my career. I put such an emphasis of what I wanted
The
to
athletic
do,
director.
right? Like
Yeah.
I that was probably my 20-year plan,
Yeah.
right? There were going to be things that had to happen before then, but
Right.
what I had set so much, my North Star and my leading point was, this is what I want to accomplish. Whereas with a vision, I feel like it's more of, this is who I want to become. And I do believe in setting daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, and annual
Visions. Yeah, that's
so that
different.
you can
Vision.
become who you want to be.
That's right.
This is what keeps popping up into my mind, but I love the visualization of the experience that you share of wanting to feel the grass. So I want to go back to that just a little bit and talk about, and anyone that's listening, I'd like you to really listen along, whether that's closing your eyes, really try to visualize the story of what's happening here. So James, if you can paint that picture, being in the hospital and sharing this experience, I want us to all try to visualize what this is like.
Everyone has goals, something they want to do. Set a goal, wanted to throw rocks. Had that happen.
You're 1 for
right?
1.
1 for 1. So now that this is the first time it's a goal that doesn't involve doing damage to someone's Cadillac. So I'd always watched kids run in the grass, and I wanted to do it, but I couldn't. I was either in the wheelchair, I was in stitches, I couldn't be around. They were being overly protective of me, whatever. But I wanted to know what grass felt like, and it was one of my biggest dreams to see what that was like. And the day that I finally got to do that, to walk and to feel that what grass was like, it was like hitting a home run in a World Series for me. It was like, it's soft. I can remember that. I don't have a lot of memories of opening up gifts at Christmas and stuff, but I remember that moment because it was such a big thing to me, to feel grass. I thought that was like the pinnacle of things. The experience of it. It's soft. It feels funny, but I can remember living that moment and it being so big to me because I'd never been allowed to, and I wasn't able to. I just had a follow-up to that. We went on family vacation when I was 14, I think it was. And I had gotten a prosthetic. It was heavy, 25 pounds, and I couldn't get it wet, can't do a lot of things. And this thing would jar back and forth when you would wear it. And so you're going to get boils, you're going to have problems, you're going to have pain. And so we went to the family reunion in Miami from Indiana, and we drove in a van all the time.
It's a long drive.
Long drive, hard to get along.
16 hours.
Yeah, a lot of issues going on with kids and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like he's breathing on me, touching me, all that type of stuff, But I remember we got there, and they were going on the beach, and I was sitting in the van and watching them. And I couldn't go out and do what they did. I couldn't go out in the ocean. I couldn't do all those things because the leg had to be protected. And I couldn't hop. I just had another revision. And my grandmother was like, baby, one day my dream is to see you do this. But she passed away before I ever got to do it. So I'm 49. I'm in San Diego. And I mentioned that. And the guy I'm with says, hey, let's drive to the beach now. So I take that back. I was 50. It was this year. And when we got to the parking lot, I immediately was 14 again. I mirror her words, and I wondered what sand felt like. So I'll go out and I'll walk out, and I got in the water because now they have waterproof legs and stuff. And all I could think about was, to everyone else, it's just a guy running out there in the sand and overly excited about something. But it was a milestone from the grass to the sand because I fulfilled her dream and mine just to know what that was like. small moments, man, could be everything. And for me, to still be finding those moments. Big vision, the vision she had for me then, I thought about one day, I was like, yeah, I would like to do that. And yet it took almost 36 years for that to take place, man. But here I am.
You know, as you shared that experience, being 15, those years of high school that you had were interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about the basketball team.
Dude, I tell you.
The 2 years.
Yeah. I dreamed of playing basketball. I wanted to from the time that I was got my first prosthetic, when my nurse was telling me I would be able to do it. My mom saying there's no way you'll ever do it. It's not in you. You're crippled, get that out of your mind and all that stuff. And so part of it was to prove her wrong. But I wanted that validation. Every kid that I knew that was famous, popular, whatever it was, played basketball. I had cousins who were Mr. Basketball. I knew NBA players from Anderson and stuff, and I was like, man, maybe I could. And then to mess around, you got video games, you can creative player. My creative player made every team, so why couldn't I? So it was time for me to try out, man. And I watched IU games, man. I used to bounce up and down on a trampoline as part of my rehab. So I knew I had vertical. I had all these things that I envisioned, I dreamed of. I watched Georgetown play basketball, and they had big men back then. I watched their drop steps, and I learned those things by watching how they with their feet. I was ready. So I tried out for the team. And I was so excited, man. I just knew I was going to make it. And to get cut from the team, and then there's no one there to tell you cut. You know how the coaches do it. Mm-hmm. They put a list of who made it, but they post that while you're still in the gym. You come out, the coach is gone. It's just you and the list. And if you didn't make it, you're left with that alone. And so I needed to know why. That's the one time where why came in. So Coach Darner, I was like, man, I need to know why. And the guy was kind of avoiding me and stuff. So I took everything that he did to cut me. The running, the Death Valleys, the finishing the mile in less than 6 minutes, all the stuff that wasn't directly basketball. That's what I had to go back and change. And so I went to the athletic director, and I said, man, all I want is a fair shot. Can you please come to tryouts and just make sure that he gives me my fair shot? That's all I want. But, man, every morning I got up. I never had an alarm clock. I don't have one now. My grandmother had chickens. I lived in the city, but we had chickens. You know, so roosters are going off, neighbors are upset, but she was country. And
there's no snoozing those.
Yeah, there's no snoozing. So I'm waking up, and so I get up at like 4 a.m. every day. And no alarm. You know, we get up, and I saw that there was a billboard that Wendy's was advertising that it was 1 mile ahead. And so I knew the distance to run from that billboard that was at the corner by my house to Wendy's. And I ran that, and I would touch Wendy's and come back, and I would time it. Did I get there in 6 minutes? I did that every morning, whether it was rain. I did it with a leg that was no more than what a mannequin has on it. I did that every freaking day. It didn't matter what it was like. I ran that every day leading up to the trial. So I tried for the team because everything that he did to cut me, I wasn't going to let that be the case. And so we're running back and forth. I dislocate my kneecap. I push it back in place. I get the hopping, and I go back and forth. I'm touching every line. I'm going to finish. This is with him saying, stay down. I get up.
They called an ambulance. And there was paramedics on the way. Yeah. You were down.
Yeah, because I wasn't supposed to get up. And you ever have a moment in life where it kind of defines you? It comes a moment like when your dream that you had doesn't come true. Maybe it was like your goal of being an athletic director was the dream, and if you found out that you weren't going to be, you end up leaving college. So the idea of being that becomes impossible now. And you say, well, it becomes a nightmare instead of a dream. But then you realize that there's a different path, right? And that there's something in you other than just a role because roles change, but your identity doesn't.
Yeah.
And who you are and the way as an athletic director, all you were going to do is help better people's lives. That's what you do anyway. It went beyond athletics. It went to everyday life. Me, I'm sitting there when I got up off that ground, and the fact that those teammates joined in with me made me feel a camaraderie. But they didn't join me because they had another lap. They joined because I wouldn't stop my laps. They joined because I didn't quit. Spirit draws people, man, and what we have, what we're called to do, is a transferable skill to give people something that's on the inside, and they were like a magnet. They draw onto that, but that's really just the spark of divinity in us to draw them back to Him.
I think something you forgot to mention as part of that story was when you got cut that first time.
Yeah.
You then spent that next year training.
I grind. I lift weights. I ran. I hated Coach Donner the whole year. I wanted to fight his sons when I saw him. I mean, you name it. It became a passion. And I trained every single day for that day. And I refused to be broken. But I found out there was more in me. There was another level. But it took being cut to cut that out of me.
Well, and I visualize that moment. You're in the gym. You've trained a year to get to this moment. You've worked on lateral movements. You've been working on jumping and running. And then I can see time stop. You're on the floor. Your knee dislocates. Everyone around you is telling you to stop.
And everyone turned their head away from it.
Everyone turned their head. They called the paramedics. It was, as far as you were concerned, as far as everyone else was concerned, you were done. Yeah. As far as you were concerned, this was one of those defining moments for you. Mm-hmm. And that persistence and drive then led on to you being able to play college.
Dude, if it wasn't for that moment, if I don't get up, I don't determine that nothing would stop me. If I don't get up, I don't find out what it feels like to have other people come and support your teammates. I don't keep the drive going. I don't end up getting the state championship in AAU. I don't end up playing against Sean Bradley. I don't get a chance to dominate Damon Bailey, who was the number one player. I don't get a chance to do that stuff and then get a college scholarship. Man, that to me was the ultimate, because when they announced my name graduating in high school and they had to announce the fact that I had a basketball scholarship, and I got to walk across that stage, grab that diploma, and then look at the coach and realize that what I went through turned me into this, and that no one could stop me. No one but me.
You walked away with a championship, college scholarship, instead of being carried off on a stretcher.
That's it.
Right?
That's it.
Those were your choices?
That was it. I stay down. I let that define me. I let everyone keep their head turned and stay as a what if.
So a couple chapters later on the topic of turning your head, right? Turning away from the moment, something that you don't want to face. I'm going to read a portion of the book here on pages 78 and 79. Talks about how you and the kids on the bus had a habit of throwing things at the bus driver while they were driving home, which ran off many bus drivers. Yeah. The other kids on the bus would sell and smoke drugs on the bus. It was a bad situation. Those kids separated from me. I didn't want to sit with them in the bus anymore. Instead, I would sit up towards the front of the bus with the bus driver. Mm-hmm. And then the district hired a little bus driver, a little white lady who was under 5 feet tall and terrified. She announced that she knew that the route had a bad reputation, but it was a brand new bus, and she was going to play whatever radio station they wanted. She was connecting with the kids. She was focused on that, right? And then a little bit later, it talks about, or you say, the bus driver came to your home. Mom saw her at the door, got upset with you, said, "James, the school bus driver is here. What have you done?" And then you said, "I don't know." The bus driver had a fruit basket in her hand and addressed my mom and said, "I want to thank you and thank your son for protecting me." And then your mother said, "Oh, wow, that's great." The bus driver reported the problem the problem students to the school district with them selling drugs, with the challenges that she faced on the bus. And then you confirmed what she said, right? My fellow students were indeed throwing things and selling drugs. In the end, my former friends were kicked off the bus. And then down there, it says the parents had pulled together a city meeting to discuss getting rid of the white bus drivers on the black side of town.
That's right.
I was just 16, but I went to the meeting. And this is the part that I really want to emphasize, and I want to paint this picture. All of the parents, the students that have been kicked off the bus, are sitting on one side of the room. And here's the bus driver on the other side of the room. And you say, I was just 16, but I went to the meeting. The parents of the drug-dealing students who were trying to get rid of the bus driver, alleging that she had had their children kicked off the bus because they were black, sat on one side of the room, and on the other side of the room, all by herself, was the little white lady trying to defend her honor. I sat down beside the bus driver. I would not sit quietly as community leaders proposed removing her from the black side of town. I stood up and spoke in her defense. I persuaded the leaders not only to keep her, but I convinced them that the other parents were in the wrong. As we talk about moments where it would be so easy to turn your head, right?
Brother.
How easy would it have been for you to very simply just choose a different side of the room to sit on?
Let me give you something that's even deeper than that. Many of the people that I was testifying against were all relatives. They were family members. These were kids that, there were three parts to that. Kids were having sex on the bus, fighting, selling drugs, you name it. I've
You're in
seen
high
more
school.
people. This is in high school.
This is in high school.
Right. And we had seen so many become drug dealers, so many fights, so many different things that were happening on it, and chased off tons of bus drivers. And this lady comes in, she gets a new bus, she plays our music, she treated us great and all that stuff, but the tradition had already been set. And so throwing stuff at her, tormenting the bus driver while they're driving is what they would do. Yeah. And the intimidation factor was so strong. And this lady, not only being white, but under, I think D. Weber's her name. She's about 4'11", if that. And when I would see her hands trembling as she's driving, I'd see tears. She was always afraid. And I just couldn't watch that anymore. And so I went and sat right behind her so that anybody who threw anything, it had to hit me first. And just standing up for her. I kept a kid from stabbing her. And because she had turned him in for selling drugs on the bus. And so when we got to our last stop, when I was ready to get off with her, he was about to kill her. He was coming on to kill her so she couldn't testify. And I stood there and stood between the two. And man, I'm talking about this was the worst of situations. And so they were saying this was just a white woman trying to get black men, black boys, black kids out of school. They decided to hold these meetings, and there were civic leaders, pastors who came, and they were like, we need a black bus driver on the black side of town, and this, that, and the other. And the problem wasn't anything to do with ethnicity. The reason why I didn't say race is because there's only one race, it's human. Outside of that, there's ethnicity. But when people try to make this thing racism and say that it was about her not liking black people, and I knew how she was, I came to the meeting, and I think she had said something like, mentioned it, and I know everyone else on the bus was talking about, man, we're about to get her fired, this, that, and the other. We're going to get the kid that got kicked off and banned, the drug dealer, we're going to get him back. There was unity behind that and this no culture of no snitching, and here she was a snitch, so she had to go. They were willing to kill her for that. And so I had to stand up for her. And when I did so, when she showed up at my house with a fruit basket, she was afraid and all this stuff. And I didn't know that she was coming. And she really did thank me for being in her life and saving her. And so when they had this meeting, I came with the idea I was going to watch. But when I saw the way it was going, I walked over and I sat beside her. In fact, they celebrated that I was coming up because they were like, he's articulate, he's communicating, he's about to tell how it really goes. Because it was my uncle that was the one who was the civic leader going against her. And I'm not talking about a distant relative. I'm talking about I saw this uncle all the time. He had such a hatred for people who were white that he couldn't see right and wrong. And he was a pastor. And so when I went against him, it cost me relationships that never got repaired because they felt like I chose a white woman over family. But I chose the right thing over anything.
Chose a human being.
Yeah.
We've talked about 4 or 5 stories from, when you were born up until you graduated high school. Those are defining core moments, right? The rocks, Matt and Gilbert, touching the grass, being 14 and wanting to go to the beach, and then basketball team, and then now this experience with the bus driver. Let's cover just a little bit. When you graduated high school, you went up to Wisconsin, Minnesota? Where was the Bible?
I went to Minnesota.
Yeah. So went to college for a few years. Some really unique experiences that are shared in the book about that. But there's one part that really stood out to me. You go to Bible college, you hear of this opportunity, you pack up a U-Haul, move to New York, you start preaching, and then you're forced out of this church that you're preaching in. Tell me a little bit about that first experience of, the congregation was really liking the sermons and the message that you were sharing, and that intimidated the head pastor at the time.
That's right.
Right. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Man, this is great experience, right? It's great for this reason. So, coming out of Bible college, man, all I can think about is changing and making an impact in this world. We're going to start get education, a biblical education, new principled education to kids. All I can think about is we're going to change the world. I get to the pastor tells me, we candidate for pastoral jobs, right? It's just like a job interview. And the pastor, we talk on the phone. He's like, man, we got it. Come on. So I arrive, got the family, brand new wife, brand new baby. We arrived to New York in a U-Haul. And he tells me, they're inside, give me a moment, so we're going to introduce you. But the truth is, he had never told the congregation much about me. They already had a guy who was there as a candidate who lived in the area that was going to be the candidate who they were going to hire. And he goes, but this guy from Indiana he moved here and he's outside. And so he put pressure on him and leveraged me against the other guy. This guy moved his whole family. He's outside. And why would Stefan, he already lives here. He can get a job elsewhere. So they hire me, but there's resentment when I arrive that they just didn't pick a hometown guy. And the pastor been kind of a little deceptive in getting me in because he didn't like that guy's family. He didn't, whatever. I didn't know that at the time. I'm just naive. But I get in there, and he said, we're going to pay you weekly. Now, I thought that meant every Sunday I get a check, but he meant like
if we have money, we'll pay you.
If we have money, we'll pay you. I know there's a
weekly
salary.
WEAKLELY.
So I'm struggling, man. I'm like, some Sundays I get the full check that I'm supposed to get. I think I was only getting $30,000 a year, right? That was the salary. But some Sundays he was like, hey, listen, wasn't very good today. We had to take care of some priorities first. Me and my wife, were on staff.
Baby, the house.
But your third option, right? Right. So you're going to get $75 this week. And I'm like, oh, man. He's like, I know it's going to be tough, so just buckle down. And I was like, man, we don't even have food. And so he's like, oh, I'll handle that. Hey, excuse me, congregation. Pastor Dixon and them don't have food. If you bring some canned goods next Sunday, it'd be great. And people would give you the stuff they wouldn't eat. Lima beans, they'd give you oranges that are already half bad and stuff. And so I was like, I just go get me a secondary job. But I never complained. So I got a secondary job. And then he's like, you're putting a lot of time on that other job instead of the one you're supposed to. And so I'm working 2 jobs full time. But I'm taking care of expenses no matter what. the pastor has a stroke. When he has a stroke, I have to start preaching more. Because before he would be like, look, let's give it some time. Church has about 75 members, but they're good givers, you know? And so next thing I know, I speak the first Sunday, and the people really responded well. Next Sunday, more people there. Finally, there's like 300 people coming. This is all while he's having a stroke. And now he's not talking well, but he started writing stuff, right? He would write. He's like, enough of that. You know, he's like, you got to find your. So he was like, we're going to start having you speak only on the fourth Sunday, and we'll have the deacons and other men in the church speak, but not you. That's enough of that. But the giving was up, the attendance was up, the church would tripled in size. This is happening, you know? And there's a buzz about it. There's growth that's happening. And each Sunday, it was my job to go to his house and give him an update of how things went. This was the attendance. Here's the offering. And it was almost like watching someone's hatred grow for you. Every time, so I'd go, hey, guess how many people were there this week? He'd write down, I don't care. How much did we bring in? And he never would give me a raise. Even when we had the money, sometimes they would still be weekly. And then ultimately he said, it was almost like the town isn't big enough for the two of us. You got to go. And I don't want you to tell them why. I just want you out. Because this is my church. And him feeling threatened, he would rather the church close than grow.
Under someone else's direction.
Yeah. So it was the first time I had church hurt. But it also was probably where I should sort of seen that there were breadcrumbs leading me to this path. Think about this now. Sometimes church without walls can give you an open impact in lives that being in the church walls would have kept me from, people wouldn't have known me except for that congregation. Ultimately, there were so many great things that happened ministry-wise, right, in life. But being outside of the pulpit has given me a platform to always be in the pulpit.
I love that. A couple of years ago, I had this thought come to mind of thinking about, if you think of a home, you've got a fence that, a lot of times you're restricted. You can't leave that fence if it's a hard cover, covering the whole backyard and stuff. And then I had the thought, I was like, how different is it when you have a gate at the back of the fence, right? So occasionally you can open the gate, go outside, venture, learn about the world, come back to the safety of that backyard and lock the gate. And I realized the comparison here was the backyard is your life, your principles, the gospel, whatever you believe in, there's safety in those. There's safety in that barrier that you have. But when we restrict ourselves and close ourselves off from everything else, we don't learn anything. But allowing ourselves to have a gate that we can open and venture and learn and expand our professional knowledge, our spiritual knowledge, with the safety of knowing that we can come back to what we know is safe and true and right. And I think that's the valuable thing about opportunities and experiences here. This portion that I had talked about as I was writing out the outline for this was allowing obstacles to be seen as opportunities. And then the next part was how doors are opened, right? So thinking about this is a huge obstacle. And what you didn't share is that the pastor told you that you needed to leave the church without telling anyone. He kicked you out.
Yeah.
And then come to find out he had been telling everyone that you had forsaken the ministry, that you had like all these bad things, right? And it was just like, man,
he created a narrative so that no one would follow you.
Right. And I think that's the best definition of turning an obstacle into an opportunity, right? You didn't let that get you down, but you went on to become a very, very successful preacher that impacted thousands of lives.
Oh, man.
Right?
Yeah. Had he not done that, there are some things in life that strengthen your resolve. How bad do you really want to be that person? If it goes sideways, can you stay straight? You know?
Yeah.
And that, like looking back in my life, I had someone say, it seemed like everything that would go bad goes right for you. And I said, you know what? I think that's just the way you have to look at life. Bad things will happen, but it's your choice on how you're going to respond to it. Sometimes a setback is your setup.
I heard a really interesting quote that I loved the other day that says, the comeback is more important than the setback.
Oh, yeah. Good word.
On page 134, it's at the end of chapter 32.
Okay.
The chapter's titled "Finding My Way Back to Faith," and this, you'd gone through some challenges, you'd broken away just a little bit, you were going through a personal testimony, difficulty, and challenge, and then on page 134, it talks about the death of your grandmother. Tell me a little bit about that experience. It really was full circle because she passed in the hospital that you were born in, right?
Right.
Tell me a little bit about, you had been going through these challenges, the hardships, everything that you knew was shaken a little bit, and you had found yourself distanced from faith. What was that experience like coming back to that?
Wow, man.
As a result of that experience with your grandmother passing.
Yeah. Wow, that's a heavy one. I made my grandmother a promise that I never let her go in a nursing home. It's the only promise I ever made her. And she made me promise that to her. I probably was 8 or 9 when that happened. And when I was 24, living in New York, she gave me a call and she said, you remember the promise? We never talked about it again, but I immediately knew. I moved from New York that day. I went in and talked to my bosses. Either you transfer me so I can work for you guys there, I quit, one or the other, but I'm gone. And so my grandmother was everything to me. And so I had made a lot of decisions. I'd gone to Bible college. I had done the right thing. I'd helped the bus drivers. I had always tried to do the right thing. And as a result of that, I felt like I could call in a loan from God, right? And I was like, Lord, I had even asked him, I said, if you got to take years off of my life to give it to grandma, please do. Just don't take her from me. And many times she would be ailing, things would look bad. And I'd sit there and I'd start praying and I'd be like, Grandma, don't go. I need you. And I would see her get better. And I was there at the hospital so much, so my family said, hey, listen, you got to get some time for yourself. Why don't you go to a movie or something? And they convinced me to go to a movie. And I was like, Grandma, I'll be back, okay? And she was like, yeah, she nodded her head. Because right now she has a trach. And so some of the conversation is hard to read her lips. And she said, okay, I'll go to the movie. And at the time we had pagers. So pagers are the way we communicate, send messages.
What's a pager?
Yeah, it's like a rotary phone to you. But pager is like a text message. And they said if something bad is happening, they'll send me all ones representing at any second. So I had just got the popcorn. I just sat down. And now I'm 40 minutes away, if you will. I'm speeding back to the hospital. When I get there, everyone is kind of wailing and hugging each other. And by the time that I get to walk through the doors, I see everybody hugging each other and stuff. And I don't know what's going on. I don't want to assume. I don't want to believe that this couldn't have happened. There was no sign that she was going. She still had color in her face, and she was interactive. So when I turn and I look into her room and I see the mortician zipping up that bag with my grandmother in it, and I had an aunt walk over to me at that very second. Now, mind you, I'd been the spiritual leader of the family now. I'd been a minister and all that stuff. And my aunt walks over to me and says, if you had been here, she'd still be here. And so imagine 25, feeling that guilt as if it were your fault. And then the bargain I had thought I'd made with God. God, I told you I'd serve you. I'd do anything. Just don't take her. And for me, that was the struggle. The idea that my family felt it was somewhat my fault, or the fact that they are embracing each other, but no one's embraced me, because the idea is that I'm strong enough. I'm the one that I've got it together, whatever. And it hasn't, but I still haven't even let it sink in that the possibility that she would be gone. I mean, there's no way, after I begged you. And so I have to preach her funeral. With a heart that's tied between two thoughts. God, why? Why didn't you do this for me? And the other side, I knew I needed to honor her and him. And so that message, and the only way I could deliver it, is that there was a packed church. The church was full. Is I had to look at the people on the friend side, on the left side of the church, who were less emotional in their expressions, so that I could, because I couldn't look at the rest of the family. To grow through all those challenges and fighting and feeling like you wrestled with God, to end up like Jacob and realize that there was a purpose plan. He's changing you. To be back here now. Yeah. That was a journey, man, because I realize now I should have gratitude about the time that she was giving me. And then now I get to share some of the principles and wisdoms that she passed on. And then I see sparks of her in other people. The way you give, I see it. The way I see other people with a passion to serve people, I see it. And so, yeah, it's a tough one, brother.
I think as you reflect on it, though, echoing the point you made earlier, you now realize, we always, death is a hard thing. Mm-hmm. But the sting of death is swallowed up in the joy of Christ.
Come on.
Right? And I think as you look back and think on that, you can profoundly say and pridefully exclaim, it was less about your schedule and more about his agenda.
Yeah.
Right? And I think a pivotal moment on this journey, right, if we think about your timeline, where this tapped in for you, you close out this chapter on page 134. You say, I realized I did not know how to deal with the grief of losing my grandmother. I was expected to be strong for everyone else, but there was no one that I could turn to during that grief. I mean, how many of us feel like that, right? Yeah. Always having to be the pinnacle, the strong one, not knowing who to talk to because you don't want to, you're trying to save face, or you don't want to give off this opinion or feeling that you're not strong enough to handle that. So I was expected to be strong for everyone else, but there was no one I could turn to during that grief. So I went wayward. I didn't yet understand that even pastors need pastors to help them through tough times. Without a support system for myself and men to whom I could be accountable to, I found myself operating in sin and doing things that I never would have done. And then right here, I think, is the amazing thing that came as a direct result of this lesson and this challenge that you went through, turning an obstacle into an opportunity. Now that I had found my way back, I could not study without repentance. The more I studied, the more I knew I was wrong. The more I opened the Bible so I could prepare for others, the more I was being changed. The accountability of having to be prepared for someone else became a great thing for me, though I did not think so at the time.
Man.
And I love this paragraph as you close out, probably one of the toughest. I mean, your grandmother was your support system.
Right.
She helped you when you were 11 years old when you were in the hospital.
That's right.
She gave you a vision of one day you would be able to go into the ocean and play in the sand. Mm-hmm. For her to pass in the hospital that you were born into. Mm-hmm. And then for this to be the opportunity and the catalyst that helped you realize that as I studied and as I prepared other people, that was preparing me. That was bringing me back. That was helping me learn from that. And then that accountability of being prepared for other people became a great thing for me. I love that. So that it's a really interesting challenge that you faced there. And then, the challenges didn't stop from there, right? Like
No, not at
preaching
all.
then became less of a, you came to this crossroad and this fork in the road where it's like, there's a lot of, you're facing a lot of scrutiny and the people that you're surrounded by. And there was kind of this falling out with the news station. And then all of a sudden you found yourself pushing carts, right?
Yeah.
Here's this
Yeah.
this statue. Here's James Dixon pushing carts.
Man, that was a struggle. Two things. To wrap up the thing with my grandmother, when I came to the hospital, I ended up being ministering to someone at that hospital. And when I went in, I was immediately kind of thinking back to the last time I was in that hospital. It was for her. But when I got there, they had done a renovation, and the area that I would have walked through her room was no longer there. There's no longer access there. It was kind of like the closing of a chapter for me to realize there's a point in time where you have to leave the grave, because the grave is where we go to set up a monument of a life that was lived. Life is about taking the lessons from that life, adding it to your living big enough that life echoes. I had to live big enough for the both of us now. I had to take those lessons and share them and repeat them so that somebody else would learn it. And then it took time for it to be internalized. So when I ended up working and had to learn some lessons in humility, I had to take the job at Costco, and I go pushing carts because that was the job they hired me for. And I didn't think of anything of it. I never thought myself too good to do anything, but I was pushing it. And the people started talking and treating me like I was less than human. And I was like, oh, no, I didn't like that. And I thought maybe it was some ego, maybe some pride in there. But I was like, you know what? I'm going tomorrow dressed like me, So I put a suit on to push the same carts. But there was something different. I pushed them with the same enthusiasm. I could grab the 10 at a time, bring them all in. Sometimes I put up to 24. I could guide that thing like a missile into place. I'd bring them all back in, fill it back up real fast, and I'd do it with joy and purpose, because whatever I was going to do, I was going to try to be the best at. But I just could not go through people talking to me as if I didn't have value, right? I'd been through too much to become something for people to talk to me like I was bankrupt, right? And so I was like, I'm going to dress up. So I put a suit on and I'm pushing, and people thought I was the general manager now. I'm pushing carts only. But now people are coming in and say, listen, there was an employee that was kind of rude to me, and I was like, I'm sorry that happened to you. And I talked with them and stuff, calmed them down. They said, I'm glad you do something about that guy. You got it, ma'am. And I'm pushing the carts. Now, the guy at the counter is higher up than I am. But I got hired there in December for Christmas help. I was employee of the month in 3 weeks. I was employee of the month in January, February, March. And then I was promoted to the marketing manager. I went from $12.50 an hour, I think, to $84,500
an hour.
I wish it was, man. But for me, it was it was a shift, though.
Yeah.
The shift didn't take place with the promotion. The shift took place when I adjusted how I was going to allow myself to be seen, right? Because how I saw myself was how I was going to project it. If I let them define me from the exterior, then that's a problem. So I was like, I'm going to project who I want to be. I am going to be that. And so when I got the employee parking spot, for employee of the month, man, I was like, I'm not letting this go. I didn't like walking around from the backside of the building all the way around. I want to keep it. And so, there are times where people will look at you and think, you're doing too much, working too hard for too little. Why do you do more than other people? The reason why you do more than other people is because you're not average. And if you feel that call to be great, you're going to be great at whatever it is. If it's bowling, if it's skiing, whatever it is, the best version of you that you can be. And then it just so happens that sometimes you become the best at it.
It's an obstacle I faced my entire life. Being pre-diagnosed ADHD, right? Not knowing why I had so much energy, working on a million projects, always taking off more than I could handle, biting off more than I could chew. I had so many people tell me like, you're doing too much, you're involved in too much, you need to slow down, you need to pull it back. I'm like, you're not me.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important lesson that, that we're talking about here is, and I've noticed through personal experience that out of 100 people, you'll probably have 80 to 90% or 80 to 90 people that will tell you that will pull you back, pull you down, that will say you're doing too much, you need to slow down, you need to take a break. Yeah. And then you have the 10 people.
You're going to burn out.
You're going to burn out. Right. Then you have the 10 people that you truly identify with that are that support system. And I think that's the community of what absolute motivation is, right? It's the community of people that want to support and help each other. You read through the comment section, walk away feeling inspired. And that outward manifestation of that inward presence of who you truly were helped people understand your value and your worth just by the way that you presented yourself.
Man, you said this. Absolute motivation is really about this, is that I'm so resolved that I don't have to make resolutions. I'm absolutely motivated to be the best me. But sometimes, man, I put it on, man. I get so wired up. And I'm listening to people that I've personally selected to be on there because there was something, a fire in them or some passion or something they bring to the table or whatever, right? And it'll be a compilation put together of some of the greats. And as I'm listening to it, it just challenges me and provokes me, and I know it provokes others. But it's about keeping those who are on fire, keeping them hot enough that they can set fire to the rest of the world. There are very few people that maybe out of that 100, there might be 10 of people who are motivated to be more. But within that 10, there's maybe 2 that set the agenda for that 10. Because you're a difference maker. You could easily just, when people were telling you you're doing too much, or you're overly involved, you got to find one thing, right? Whatever it is that they were saying, I found that the people that put brakes on me did it because they never saw themselves leaving that territory. And so I've had relatives tell me, you've changed. And so when I say that term, you've changed, here's the idea, right? If someone ever tells you you've changed, that's a good thing. That means that they're mourning what you once were because they could handle that version of you because they could compete against that one. But whatever you've become is next level. They don't even recognize. That's because you took something that was on the inside and pulled it out. I hung around people and found that the more I was around people that didn't have goals and agendas, it limited me. When that incident happened with the bus driver, I lost friends. Kids said I was an Uncle Tom, not understanding that Uncle Tom was the redemptive person in the story. It's Sambo that was the limited. They mislabeled me. They had me wrong all along. I wasn't a Benedict Arnold. I wasn't an Uncle Tom. I was something, I was different because I knew that no matter what, we're not jumping on kids for no reason. We're not beating up old people. We're not robbing people, selling drugs. And when I went to the ward, it was the first time in my life I had seen fathers. That's why I wanted it. When I saw those visions, when I saw that there could be more, that's when I wanted more. And the more I get around people who are driven, who are absolutely motivated to be more, do more, I get around them and it becomes something that I incorporate. I'm like, now that I've seen it, I can be it. Put me around great people and I'll become one of the greats. Put me around those who leave an echo that others can follow. I never thought I'd write a book. Never thought it'd be documentaries. Never thought it'd be a cartoon. Never thought all these things that have come. But being driven, absolutely, towards whatever the best version of you is, it opens doors that you never thought possible.
And that's accomplished, echoing a point you made just a little bit earlier. Whatever you were doing, you were focused on being the best at it, right? If you're going to do something, do it well. If you're going to be pushing carts, you're going to push the carts the best.
I'm going to be the best carts pusher ever.
Right? My
right.
favorite jobs that I had growing up, my first job, I worked at Little Caesars for $6.25 an hour. I'd write notes in pizza boxes. I would help set up campaigns to get people in the door. I was bringing people in from the high school. I used that to go work at a tuxedo shop. That prom rental, I wanted to get a free tux for prom. So I leveraged and we sold more tuxedos that season than we've ever done for prom season. I took that, went to McDonald's, worked at McDonald's for $8.25 an hour. So I went $6.25 to $7.50 to $8.25. And I broke the drive-through record on processing cars during a window drive.
There we go.
Right? Like, so many people would have said, oh, you're just working at McDonald's. It's like, no, I'm working at McDonald's.
Yeah.
We're breaking records here.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm the hand model in how you make McCafe stuff from McDonald's.
Yeah.
I'm the hand model in how you make like the
all the
different
beat
drinks,
that.
right? And then I go out to Utah and transfer when I'm going out to school. I break the record again for processing cars in the drive-thru. All of those skills that I learned, every single one of those, I made less than $10 an hour.
Wow.
And had I just said, I'm just working at McDonald's. I'm just working at Little Caesars. It's like,
come on. If
I could do anything, it's when I retire from entrepreneurship and when I'm not running multiple companies and involved with all the millions of projects that I have going on, I want to go back and work at Little Caesars. And I'm going to be the best front cashier agent at Little Caesars that I can be, right? So you segued us perfectly into the last section that I wanted to talk about. Talking about your experience from pushing carts at Costco into new doors being opened. So tell us a little bit about the experience. You found yourself working in a factory. You had a leg that you were working on that wasn't sufficient for the workload that you were bearing. You were walking 17 miles a day. All of a sudden, this leg breaks. You tape it together with electrical tape. You're doing this job. You are walking 17 miles a day on a leg with electrical tape holding it together. But as a result of the hardship that you faced by being at that job, by sticking in it, by not staying down, right? Back to your high school basketball story, by powering through to focus on doing the job, that resulted through that hard work and dedication, that resulted in two opportunities being presented for you. One, a clothing sponsorship as a fitness model working with a workout line, and then two, to you getting a new leg. Tell us a little bit about that experience of how that led to getting a new leg and how you've tested the limits of that technology.
Oh man, I got to tell you, this is amazing because it almost didn't happen. When I got the job at the factory, the only way you get in at that time was someone had to refer you. You had to be a legacy, right? And so someone who worked there, you were a direct relative, or you get a job by someone who works there that puts in your name. Then you get a call and you get to come in because of them. It's not that they get a kickback or anything. It's just you get in because someone else referred you. That's the way they had done it. Everyone was legacy one way or the other. And so when I got the job, it was a continuation. My grandfather, my grandmother, my mother all had over 40, my mom 38 years at the plant. And so I knew going in, I was third generation. I had an obligation. Wow, excuse me.
Bless you.
I knew going in to the factory that being a legacy kid, third generation, I had a debt. I was a debtor to them. I had to represent, be positive, be on time. So many of the people couldn't get a job because they couldn't pass the drug test. I mean, many. That was the biggest problem. So we did that, no problem. Like, okay. So I get a job, and they don't give you the good jobs when you come in. No, I came in with one of the worst, lifting the heaviest pieces of a frame and lifting it over daily, in and out, 17 miles of walking on a prosthetic that was already outdated. And because of the weight of the stuff I was lifting, the back of my socket cracked. And first it started off with just a small crack, and then it just kept opening up. But every time I would take a step, it would open and close. And every day, based on weather, amputees are different size. If it's cold, we shrink. If it's hot, we swell. And so the leg is different. And so as I'm going through and I'm stepping, it would sometimes pinch me. And when it pinches, it hurts like crazy. Plus, it causes tears. And so the only thing that I could do is to try to see if I could maybe do it through the work insurance. And they said it was a pre-existing. As a result of it, I had to just stay with what I had, and I had to wait until I got hired. 4 years I spent as a temp before they would even hire. And so that's just the way it went. And so for 4 years, no insurance, no anything. And it just so happened that the only thing I could think of outside of soaking at night to get the swelling down so that I could walk the next day is I took electrical tape. But I didn't just take electrical tape. I took the Superman tape that I found at Walmart and I wrap it around it. And the reason why I did that, I was decorative with it because I also wanted to remind myself that I still got to be Superman because I still have to take care of my kids. Still got to take care of the family, the wife. I had to take care of that. Didn't matter how it felt. And do you know there were many times where I wanted to quit because I was in so much pain. I was like, it's got to be another way. But my family used their name to get me in. And so I felt a sense of obligation. And also it was good pay. And all I got to do is go this route and I'll be all right. And I was really struggling. So I started working out, man, because it was, if I'm going to be doing a physical job, it's going to be breaking me down. I need to get stronger. So the more I started working out, the more I became, I was, the 17 miles gave me my cardio. The lifting added strength and size. And it just so happened I walk into the mall. And as I walk in, I open doors, there's a representative there from Under Armour. And the guy sees me and had been seeing little posts I had been making because I would always tag them. Little did I know that he would know my name when I walk in and the conversation would begin. And I end up representing, getting free clothes and all that stuff and got a little check from Under Armour representing them. The trial that I was going through, working there, opened the door for me to start a fitness routine, that opened the door for me to become a fitness model, that opened the door for me to wear shorts, which I never would have done. But I had wore it because the insurance changed and allowed me to get a new prosthetic. Socket, not the leg. There's two different components to it, right? And it just so happened me lifting, the prosthetic company happened to keep seeing me doing different things and saying I wasn't supposed to be doing that. I didn't know that every leg when we make it, there's a cap on it. So my body weight, I'm 275 right now. My body weight plus the prosthetic and anything I lift up, I cannot exceed 325. That's the limit for every amputee. And so going to deadlift, what do I want to do, just the bar? Nah, man. If I'm going to go, I'm going to go hard. And so they were freaking out about me doing that. And so they went ahead and the president was like, man, we got some technology that's emerging. We want to try it out on you. And so he comes to the gym with me and then was like, let's test the limits of this thing. So the first leg they gave me was so stiff. I can remember putting it on and I was like, and they were like, run on it. And so I go to try to run and I couldn't. I mean, it was just, dude, it was made to send. They were like, this is what they said to me. A semi could run over this leg and not break it. That's all they would. But a human can't walk on it. So what use is it? So it was invincible, but it was indestructible. But it was useless for the everyday. But they were like, so they curved the foot out some more and said, now you got a sumo deadlifting leg. So I have one for that. And anyway, they said, but we have these energy returning legs that we're preparing for soldiers, but we need to test it out. So I would get it, and it was 2 years before any soldier would get it. And the only reason why we have new technology in prosthetics is because of veterans. In order to indemnify them, they have to keep elevating the technology. Civilians get it years later. As a result of war times, we got better prosthetics. It takes trauma for a soldier for a civilian to walk better. So I got to test it, and you'll love this one. I decided we're going for records, man. And so I end up with them chastising me because I was making videos, lifting more and more. They're like, James, stop it. The leg isn't meant for that. I was like, man, make it better. And I just kept going. And anyway, they made a leg for me that I was able to set the deadlift record for amputees. Then I was able to set records that were state records for everybody. And now in the Olympic Training Center in Fort Wayne, there's a banner of me hanging for every Olympian to see because of what I've done. But I only did it because I wanted to test the limits because I always lived life with limits. But what if you took the brakes off me? What would I be if I didn't have excuses? What if the leg didn't hold me back? What if I didn't allow it? And so when I would go to lift, and I'll tell you this secret, why I was able to lift so much. There's videos with me warming up with 520 on a deadlift. That's warm up. Here's the reason why I was able to go for 705 pounds in competition. When I stood in the competition, there were two things I didn't know. I didn't know kilograms, right? So when I was saying, let's go with these kilograms, I didn't know that we were at 700 pounds, because the number sounded low with kilograms, right? Yeah. But I heard the other guy say what he wanted, and I was like, looked at him, I was like, I can do what he probably can do.
That plus 5.
Yeah, so add to it, So that's how this goes. He goes up and he lifts. The first time I go to lift, I'm going to show you. On my prosthetic, do you see there's this lip here?
Yep.
When I went to lift, first time, it got caught underneath it. And so I went down to bring it back up. And in powerlifting, that's a disqualification. You can't have a downward motion. So the first time I go to lift, 2 red lights, 1 green. So I fell. The one that gave me the green realized how it went under the leg, so I had to pull it out from under it. So that's a waste. You only get 3 lifts. Second lift, I come out, I go out further out, and I fail because I'm using the wrong technique. I had never gone at this level of weight, but it was too far out, but I was trying to get outside of the prosthetic. I'm feeling like maybe I'm outside of my depth. I'm up against guys who are 275 and above, and everybody's able-bodied. And they're clapping for me and like, oh, he tried. I didn't like that. I didn't like the feel of like empathy, sympathy that I've been through anything. Like, poor James, if it wasn't for. And so the last lift comes up, and I add to it because I wanted the record. If I was going to fail, I was going to fail at the record level. And so other guys take smelling salts, and other people have people slap them on the back, punch them in the chest, get them fired up, slap them, whatever to go up, whatever it takes to ignite that warrior within. Well, I got there, and I had a different experience. One, I didn't go with anybody to cheer me on. I was by myself. It was just waiting on my lifts. I stayed warm in the back. I came out, and I saw the guy fail on trying to break the record he had just set on his last lift. You get an extra if you set a national or state record. So it's my turn. When my grandmother went to the hospital, she fell in my driveway. And I was there with her when she fell. It was the last time she was ever outside of a hospital in life. And when she fell, I picked her up. And it didn't matter how heavy she was, I wasn't going to let her down while they were calling 911 to get her there. And so I held her up. And that experience, I thought back on. So I'm in front of this weight. I've got it there, man, and I've got this whole record. The crowd is there. I've got about a minute. I got to pick this thing up. And so
you had failed the 2 previous attempts.
I failed one. It went under. The second one, I went too far out. I was trying to adjust, and I didn't want to embarrass myself. I wanted to do this thing, but I needed to be more than just me. I needed to be beyond my ego, the idea that I'm just about to lift this thing up or I'm about to go. I've got my grips right. There are no wraps. And so I'm holding on to the bar, and I sway it out some to sway it back in to get momentum. And then I thought back to her being on the ground. And it was like, I can't leave you here. That moment, I saw her. I couldn't leave her. And so when I lifted, as I'm lifting, man, I'm primal. I'm screaming, and I'm letting out. But I'm letting out not in that testosterone thing. I'm letting out because I gave everything. There was nothing left in me. And it was pure. It was that moment, man. Everything that I was, everything that I was born to be, that moment I gave. And to lift that was lifting her dreams, lifting my dreams, lifting my goals, lifting my purpose. It was breaking all of my no's. It was overcoming my mom saying, you'll never be more than. It was overcoming the abandonment of my father. It was overcoming the abandonment of people that I thought were supposed to love me. That's what I lifted. And so when I held it and all lights went green, I kept holding it until I couldn't anymore, man. And I nearly fainted because I was holding my breath. And then when I let go, I screamed out, and they thought I was celebrating the lift, but I was celebrating what I had become. Take every pain, take every problem, and turn it into passion for purpose. Absolute motivation isn't just about a moment. It's every moment. Man, I live this life with the idea that God made me as I am, disabled, but able to call on him, weak, but finding strength in him. I can do all things. I just have to be around the right people that help remind me and hold me accountable to be more than what I was.
Imagine if you had allowed the set restriction of 325 pounds
Oh, my God.
be your limit.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if you had set a level of comfortability knowing I'll never be better than this. Mm-hmm. In 5 years, I'm going to accomplish this, and I have 5 years to do it. But instead, doubling the ability, doing what no one had ever done, mm-hmm. and a deeper tie and connection to years and years of trauma, of challenge, of overcoming obstacles, led into a moment of lifting that weight and being, allowing yourself to drop it, to let it go, to go through the pain, to hold it, to bear it, to attempt 3 times, 2 times before everyone was saying, oh, he tried, he got as close as he could. And on the third, to go for the record, to hold on to it, to extend it, and then to allow yourself to emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually heal. And I think that's, as we wrap up today, I think that's the most important message, that whatever any of us are going through, every single trial, hardship, challenge, difficulty, moment of happiness, sadness, every single piece of that leads up to who we are in this exact moment. And just saying, I don't know how, or I can't do that isn't an answer enough. That's not a solution. That's an excuse. To say a year ago you were working in a factory and now a year later a channel's done 150 million views and has 1.5 million subscribers of a community of people that want to better themselves, not just in the long term, but in focusing on every single unique and intricate moment on their timeline. That's what absolute motivation is. That's what life is. And when you can tap into that, you understand that life is less about achieving something at the end of your life and more about enjoying and living the moment that you live in, right where your feet are.
It's about going through something to become something, and then learning this thing that whatever you face, one day has to face you. You become something, man. Ryan, you make an impact. You make a difference in lives, even mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to do this today. This was
Honored, man.
This was a really, really good conversation. As final wrap up, James and I met by chance. A year ago, I was working for an organization here in Utah, met a guy that introduced me to one of my best friends, Sean Finnegan, that introduced me to his friend and partner, Devin Johnson. Mm-hmm. And I had a phone call with Devin. I'd been doing ice baths on TikTok, whole nother story for another day. Long story short, they're opening up a business in Indianapolis, and they asked me to come out to do a video for the grand opening of that business. And I fly out there 2 weeks later, and James and I happen to be there at the same time, at the same moment, at the same studio. Mm-hmm. And we meet there and share an experience. And, it was chance, but it was divine chance. It was orchestrated.
What you don't know is I had agreed to come there on that date, and to keep my word, I had to make a lot of adjustments to make sure I was there, but it was divine. I didn't know you were going to be there, other than they had mentioned there was a guy, and I was like, all right, I've never done this before. You guided me through, but little did I know, man, you become one of the most impactful people in my life on that day.
Likewise.
So
grateful for the time, grateful for the friendship. I hope if you watch this today, as you listen to this, there were multiple things that you were able to take away. Take notes, ponder on the memories that you have that make up who you are today, and know that life is all about finding the small moments that make up our everyday motivation. So thank you, James.
Thank you.